Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And news-wise, I don't have too much to report just yet. I'm not sure if a lot has come out, except for everything that was happening in the Great Battle of M2, I believe it is, where the first battle was pretty impressive, of course, massive number of Titan losses, and in a pretty even fashion, with similar loss numbers on both sides. But then the second timer, there were quite a few server shenanigans, which some call predictable and others say were the real reason why everything went to pots. And so you do have a more contentious situation in the second battle. I think CCP also put out like a dev blog or a news article trying to explain what happened there. I haven't read up on that myself, been pretty busy in this first week of the new year. And overall though, when it comes to EVE news, I don't have too much to report, so let's just say that we're looking forward to any tidbits. I would love to get like a nice big reveal for a roadmap or for plans or for a focus for this first quarter of 2021, a little bit like what Path of Exile has just done. But that also means that we can take a quick look at the New Eden store, where I think the sales on services will be over or not really existent, but I did see a sale for plex on the launcher with a rather unfortunate title, honestly, buy plex get rich in EVE. I think that is not really the type of message you want to put out there for most of the player base, because getting rich, I think, is part of the goals that a lot of players set themselves in EVE Online, and giving them a pay-to-win shortcut to a specific goal there is always a dangerous message. While it is a reality, of course, you can buy as much plex as you want, put them on the market, cash in with ISK, and then go do whatever you want with your riches. I don't think trying to use that as a reason to go and buy plex is what jives with most players in EVE Online. But well, it's done. We will see if anything comes of that. I personally don't really think so. On the one hand, we don't like the type of message that would hint at anything pay to win. On the other hand, we fully realize the system in EVE Online when it comes to plex is what it is, and from some perspectives, it can be seen as a pay to win function, even though everything that is of course then acquired through the plex has been created by the players. Anyways, that means that we get to move on to the market, and let's take a look at plex and stuff to start with. It's coming in at 255. Like that, and let's take a look at the impact here. First, I think I should start with the chart. So we have a pretty sizable decline after a bump up to like 2.8 million or something like that. So we had this sale on Omega Time that drove demand for plex quite a lot all of a sudden, right? People wanted plex to convert into game time because you needed fewer plex in order to get 30 days game time. And after that, when you have a sale on plex themselves from CCP, that means you have to pay less real-life money in order to acquire plex. You also get an increase in volume, but you get the exact opposite movement. You get more supply that decreases the price. And so here now we've basically declined to a spot just above 2.5 million on average, and so we have clearly declined from that price range that we had through October and November of I think it's like 2.7 million-ish. Yep, there it is, confirmed as the average price. So here we have, of course, the impact on plex from real-life actions from CCP. I would say I call this pretty late. I would have expected more movement around the holidays and throughout December. This is basically during the holidays, and then after the holidays we still have our plex sale happening. So in GDA itself, we're still at 2.7 million for the sellers, but buyers have gone down below 2.5 million. And then, of course, we can expect a bit of a decline in Tranquility Trading Tower. Yep, we're down to 2.6 million for the sellers there. Buyers, I expect them to hardly go up. Well, it's almost 2.5 million, so they're up a little bit. And so with this situation, 2.5 million for the buyers and this average price, yeah, it's those buyers that are actually grabbing quite a bit of the trade in the Tranquility Trading Tower. And basically this is exactly what I was talking about. You get a sale on plex, people buy them from CCP and then cash them out as quickly as possible so that impatient valuations now is a margin for those plex traders because they're able to grab them just below 2.5 million ISK at the moment. Next up, the multiple pilot train certificate. Under all of that violence, I do think that we are now talking about two big jumps in volumes, and that this one could be pretty sizable. And so the multiple pilot train certificates is basically forced down as well, below 1.3 billion on today's average and yesterday's as well. Sellers coming in, a first one with 13 jumps out, that's not correct. 1.3 billion, just above that for most in range, and then buyers have gone down to just above 1.2 billion, which is a pretty nice pullback as well, putting more pressure on the price. Slight oversupply, you could say, as well in this, considering what's happening in the plex markets. For the skill extractors, now we do have an impact, so this is very interesting, right? If you compare the volume impacts, right here you get a spike, but not because plex themselves got cheaper, but the service you buy with plex got cheaper, so you get a lot of interest, a lot of demand, and an increased price. Skill extractor volumes did not move, but then you have a sale on plex themselves, and a part of that extra supply is actually being converted into skill extractors, perhaps trying to still find the best margins. So you have a volume response that turns out to be more supply as well, and thus now we have a price response going below 300 million ISK. 293 million for the sellers and 283 million for the buyers. Still decently narrow margin, so I would say quite a bit of competition trying to find the right price. And this increased volume confirms a lot of trading happening in skill extractors, trying to absorb that new supply from the plex sale. Impact on the skill injectors, if you're looking for the start of your upswing on your investment, that's probably not going to be the case just yet. This is of course pretty much a perfect storm for the large skill injector market. It's just been easier to buy omega time, so then you're less likely, I would say, to look for injectors for your omega characters. And then next to this, now we have decreased price for plex and extractors, so all of this is basically another double whammy, which brings us down to the 1 year low point for large scale injectors, starting the year at almost 850 million ISK. We're ending this 1 year chart here now. We're starting 2021 with 629 million for the sellers and just above 600 million for the buyers. So there's even a bit of a margin opening up here. I do think that that could be the market here again, and quite a bit of dumping basically happening here again with this increased volumes through all of this. I think here the market is saying this could actually be a more structural problem for a longer period of time, because we just had this sale on omega time, so quite a few players will not be interested for as many months as they've been able to fill. Now we've got extra cheap plex, extra cheap extractors. This could be bad for the short term. We are dumping, but of course for the longer term this could be your best opportunity to jump in as well, of course. Small scale injectors cannot keep their counter moves that we saw from time to time between large and small scale injectors in all of this in this market environment. And so here we have the same thing, a move down and daily averages at the 1 year low point below 130, 127 million for the sellers, 119 for the buyers. Honestly, looking at this chart, we start at 170 million ISK, and now you can buy small scale injectors if you're quick enough below 120 million ISK. It's an interesting chart, of course, but again, market psychology at the moment is more geared towards it's not really needed, and we don't know if a lot of small scale injector demand is going to pick up in the foreseeable future. And of course here CCP is the actual unknown on that. If they can come out with very cool stuff that actually also requires skill books, skill points, more endgame stuff that could drive the demand for skill points and bring that back also into the veteran players, which at the same time would widen the gap with newer players again. But All of that is, of course, you know, a discussion that CCP is having to have. Then this could be an incredible opportunity as well. So I'm trying to play both sides here a little bit on this EVE talk to try to be as neutral as possible. After these injectors, we still have the daily alpha injector that also cannot withstand the violence of all of these plex moves by CCP, and so we are diving down below the 45 million mark by quite a bit. I think 44 million for the sellers, but 39 million for the buyers. Perhaps here we also have a bit of a volume spike, so a little bit of dumping happening from daily alpha injectors. So I think some conversion maybe from real life ISK, or was there a bit of a sale? Let me know in the comments if that's the case, because I don't think you can just have plex, or can you? Let's take a quick look here at the New Eden store again. Can I buy service? Can I buy? Yeah, I can buy daily alpha injectors, so there is this same correlation between them and skill extractors, but they have this different demand market. So that is very interesting. Actually, you can convert 20 plex into daily alpha injectors and bring those to the market. So plex on sale, increased volume, prices go down due to that new supply. But look at the chart between skill extractors and plex, very close. Look at the chart between plex and daily alpha injectors, completely different because of the specific nature of the service provided by the daily alpha injectors. Super interesting. It could be very bad news in the sense that this could be the perfect storm for daily alpha injectors to realign with everything else plex related, and that would mean a serious drop off. That would be the danger. On the other hand, Omega time has been filled. Eventually players do you know, go to alpha injectors with a lot of cool content. CCP could bring in new players as well, which will usually start out taking a look at the game as an alpha clone. It is a unique situation with potentially very strong demand from a unique set of players, and so could still be a nice opportunity as well to take advantage of this drop off. It's a question of, do you think demand will be able to absorb this volume spike, which is not even that big, but the price response has been quite violent. After that, we still have the hypercores to take a look at for general game activity, and this one is going down back towards the 280,000 ISK mark. Now, here again, playing both sides. Sellers are below 280,000, buyers are just below 260,000. And on the one hand, you could say, well, this was a little bit of a bubble due to the war, and so this is increased activity. And now we are declining as, well, things have, well, there's been a pretty decisive battle, and a lot of players may be worried that, or traders in hypercores may be worried that that activity may not pick up anytime soon. We may not get the same type of hype as what's been happening here. Although I must say that then, if it stops here and the Imperium survives this would be one of the very few situations that I can remember where the invaded party would survive the invasion and not be basically burned to the ground or kicked out of their space or anything like that. Usually the attackers, I would say, know what they go up against, and they're able to plan enough to drive the enemy out. A little bit like what you saw happening with Dital. You know, you can leverage your odds to become almost insurmountable. So if that's what happens, I must say, very, very impressive. But overall here for the hypercores, right, if you read this as a gauge for player activity in the game, we are definitely on the downside. On the other hand, right, again, playing devil's advocate on this, if that is not correct, then you have a very simple explanation. You're gonna have volume spikes, and so perhaps the sale is somehow finding its way again here into the hypercore market as well. And let's take a quick look if for services we can buy hypercores. Exactly, you do have that correlation that will play. It still remains a choice from traders, of course, to say, I'm gonna buy cheap plex and then I'm gonna put it into hypercores. That's something, that a choice that I don't fully understand myself, because it is such a niche thing, but these volumes would be indicating that that is what's happening. All right, moving on to the minerals, coming in at 1420. Now, this first segment, right, is very much tied to real life money and things like that. Once we get into the minerals, it's a little bit different. This is more the in-game economy itself. And so here is Tritanium, for instance. You can see the lovely double spikes up to 10 ISK on CCB's announcement that, well, we are going into the drought mode, and at the moment we are basically operating in this economy where CCP has confirmed through the economic outlook, or the outlook dev blog, you could say, that at the moment you're basically, all your efforts are way higher than they would consider to be average for the gains that you make in the game. Now, the people that tough it out here, I do think when you find the right stuff, you have potentially incredible returns on your efforts, but overall, in general, basically they're saying it's very hard to create stuff, it's very hard to make ISK in ETH at the moment, and once we have basically realigned everything, expect us to increase the potential for players, basically per hour or something like that. So for Tritanium, we are at just below 7 ISK for the sellers, if I'm not mistaken. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, 690 for the sellers, 650 for the buyers. The one worrying thing you could say is we get $500 million here, 100 million here, 300 million units here. That's quite a bit of aggressive selling in decently large volumes compared to everything else, compared to the last few months. My read on this is that 7 ISK or just below that is still a very good and normal price for Tritanium. 10 is super expensive and could actually cause some problems for those big industrialists at some point that actually buy minerals. And my read on this is that the larger entities have basically started to really bring their own mining operations online, which has caught up with demand. Supply has caught up with demand, and so we are back at a more normal price for Tritanium. Then we've got Pyrite that is staying above 20 ISK. And just 20 for the sellers and 19.23 for the buyers. Very narrow margin. Now we get a couple of big volumes here as well. 90 million units, 200 million units, another 50 million units. So we do have a little bit of pressure due to a little bit of selling. And the question that you can ask yourself is this the same thing, right? Is basically the influence from bigger groups into HiSec starting to mature, starting to bring back returns, and starting to thus increase supplies and bring the prices back down? I think it is entirely possible, but I don't think that we'll see Pyrite go back to 5 ISK, for instance, because the normal price for Pyrite is higher than Tritanium, and so this 20 ISK range, a little bit below that on oversupply, a little bit above that on regular to slightly low supply, I think is entirely normal, at least potentially. Then we've got Mexalon, and here, ooh, interesting, we have a counter move to my expectation for sure. We actually went up to 150 ISK and we're coming back down, but we're still getting a nice extra margin on what I would call a very, very high price, extremely high price of around 125 for Mexalon. At the moment, it is going for 142 ISK, 130 for the buyers. Those buyers have jumped above any sellers from the last couple of months. Very significant move, and the exact opposite. Tritanium right on its normal average, well supplied. Then we have Pyrite has made its gains, has recovered basically in a status as being more expensive than Tritanium, and is starting to settle down. And then here Mexalon is doing the exact opposite. You can see here the latest sell orders, couple 10,000 units, 100,000 units. That is not a lot. We've got 40 million, 50 million on this front page as the biggest sell orders, but they go up to 143 and 145. And I would say the difference between these two is that Mexalon is the bottleneck for nullsec industry, can't get it locally, and it's very hard to get enough Mexalon regardless of what you mine for the regular industry cycles in the game. So overall here, Mexalon is at the moment at a super high price, and obviously your focus if you're mining in HiSec. Any Mexalon that you can bring to the market at the moment, I think, is one of those examples of, sure, your mining efforts they're pretty tough at the moment, but if you can find Mexelon somewhere, then your mining efforts are super rewarding at the moment compared to any time in the past. I think 145 ISK for Mexelon is pretty much double what I remember to be a normal price for Mexelon. So very, very valuable. Anyone that hunts and finds Mexelon as a miner is getting greatly rewarded for that. And then we've got our opposite exception. Here is Isogen, not really willing to crash down, but not willing to pull away from that 40 ISK price range. Let's take a look at the market on that. 40 ISK for the sellers, 38 ISK for the buyers. And here, well, we have this reason again: 15 million units, 71 million units, 10 million units, 20 million units, all within 1 ISK range for Isogen. I have been saying for a pretty long time that I hold to the theory that there are still reserves out there that have to be absorbed. I think 80 million is quite a lot for a single seller. I think that could be speculative Isogen finding its way to the market at the current price range. But on this EVE talk, I kind of want to do both sides of the equation. The explanation for Isogen not recovering its, you could say, status as being the fourth mineral, the mineral that comes price-wise after Mexelon, could just be exactly what I was talking about. Across New Eden, the industry needs could have changed enough with everything new that's been introduced, all of the structures, the Edencom ships, Triglavian ships, and everything across the board could have led to a situation where now, even though you're generally getting less Isogen per cubic meter of mining, the needs of industry here in general in EVE Online could be too low to bring the price back to its former glory, which was not the case in Pyrite, for instance, that has recovered that. So that is the other side of the argument, I would say, is that it's not really those old supplies and that speculative Isogen that people have been holding on to for a long time. It could just be that the needs of industry for Isogen in EVE Online at the moment are not enough to bring that price above the Mexelon market that is currently obviously really winning out when it comes to being a desired mineral and a needed mineral in the production cycles. After that, we have the Noxium market able to maintain a price above 1000 ISK, but losing a little bit here as well. 1080 for the sellers, 1000 ISK for the buyers, and here pretty noticeable as well. 7 million, another 43 million units, just above 1100, another 1.1 million, another 1 million ISK. And here it's a little bit harder to say if it is old stocks that are coming out. I personally think that, again, it's more the Tritanium story where, null-sig, low-sig groups are organizing and are taking advantage of the resource shortage to bring their own supplies online. And, well, yes, if you can sell Noxium, find Noxium and bring it to the market at above 1000 ISK, compare that to a year ago, your efforts are greatly rewarded. And after that, we have our null-sig minerals left. Here is the Zydrine chart that's able to stay well above 1250 as well. Very expensive price for Zydrine. In fact, 1350 ISK for the sellers, 2 million ISK, that seems to be the upper size, maybe 5 million down here, 3 million down here, a couple of older orders, but you can clearly see that supplies are not able to bring in 50, 100 million units of Zydrine in a single batch at this point, and buyers are forced up to 1325. So the chart actually, oh no, it's actually okay, it's just above 1250. Yeah, it's where it should be. But I think we could be on the upswing here because we have a little bit of pressure mounting on the sell prices, and then, or pressure, upwards momentum, I should say. And then we have our other oddball out. Here is the Megasite chart, quite different, even seeing a downward swing, while Zydrine actually knows a nice upwards bound here. And so Megasite is currently actually selling for 600 ISK, couple of aggressive sellers coming in, not too big in volumes, will be back to 610, pretty big, and then 572 for the sellers. And here you can have the exact same decision to make. Do you think that Megasite still has a lot of room to grow? Because volume wise it should be in line with Zydrine availability, or do you think that, well, no, this is the new reality, industry needs for Megasite are like have what you need for Zydrine in a lot of stuff, and as a result, this is just the price for Megasite. It's not harder to get Megasite, it's just as hard as Zydrine, but if you need less of it, of course, in anything that you build, then the price is going to be lower. That is really the question. Do you think parity has been reached, or do you think that old reserves could still have an impact? I don't see it in Megasite, for instance. I have to be honest. Yeah, 18 million, that's still a lot, but that's just one order on this entire page. I think it could still be for Isogen. 71 million units, that's a lot. Another 50 million round, here we go, almost 42 ISK. That's another, in my read, another big dump. Another 64 million, another 110 million, another 33 million, another 100 million over here. So you can clearly see another 2 billion units. Yeah, to me, this is still old stocks territory, but I could be wrong, and I definitely wanted to give you guys both of those perspectives at this point. And then we probably have our biggest winner. Yeah, here is Morphite, started here at 12,500 ISK and is currently selling for 70,000 ISK, 63.5 for the buyers. Bit of margin opening up, so eventually this is going to stop, of course, but this is something you don't see very often. One step up, a second step up, and then a third step up to a range that I don't know, I don't think we've ever seen for Morphite. Luckily for players that, you know, want to, do Tech 1 stuff, the more accessible stuff, this is tied to the Tech 2 economy, so you don't encounter this massive increase in cost until you go into pretty deep points. I would say a point in industry where you should be part of an alliance or at least a large corporation if you want to do that safely and steadily. But very, very impressive, of course. And a little bit unexpected, but also something, look at this chart, know that this start here, right, at 12,500, we were coming from a massive down year in Morphite where we hardly broke away from this range, and where buying Morphite for less than 10,000 ISK was very, very possible across a lot of weeks and a lot of months. And so this is the up chart, and potentially, of course, this could be the down chart, and that is the gamble, of course, of the markets in any single good. Let's move on to PI, coming in at 26.30. Here we go. Broadcast nodes, finally, I would say flattening out, but at a price range below 1 million ISK. Here you can have two sides of the story here again, I would say. On the one hand, yeah, this is just a consequence of minerals becoming more expensive, drawing in a lot of the ISK that's available from the players. Something has to give, something has to decline in price as a result of that, and CCP's clear focus on making player efforts in the game more valuable. Well, there's one aspect of the game that's the exact opposite of that. It is PI, pretty potentially passively. You can do that very actively with low cycles and fully min-maxing everything, but for most players I would say it's a very passive activity, and so this decline in price may just be CCP's intentional doing. On the other hand, another read of this could be that this is part of the structure problems, right? CCP has made it a lot harder to maintain your structures. Add to that perfect storm of larger groups wanting to extend their influence into low and into nullsec, and to get another perfect storm that has decreased demand and has created this decline specifically over the last couple of months. So broadcast nodes are selling below 1 million and buyers coming in below 900,000 ISK. Still pressure despite the fact that the average price is already a decent chunk below 1 million ISK. Construction blocks is continuing to also find its range here, but below 7,500 ISK. In fact, sellers are below 7,000, buyers are at 6.8. So here we do start to find a little bit of a consensus, but to my surprise, what we don't see is basically a round number bottom range, which is what I would usually expect when the price range has been found. Here it's below 7,000 ISK. You could say I would have expected us to bounce up from 7,000 ISK, where, you know, investors would say, all right, that's probably, going below that is probably a little bit too bad. But yeah, sellers still willing to go below this, so be careful. Consumer electronics is actually doing a slight upswing, but from 6,250 up to 7,500, and it's the sellers that have driven this up. 7,800 isk, 7.2 for the buyers, but yeah, look at that, 2, 4, 5 buyers above 7,000 isk, and then we're at 6.5 and 6.2. So it's really not a lot of demand compared to all of this supply right here. But for now, consumer electronics made a slight comeback, but is still obviously trading very, very low. Coolants is continuing its slow decline, and here 6,250 does seem to be a price point that is, goddamn, a lot of birds just outside the window. I hope it doesn't come through too much. 6,750 for the sellers, 6,500 for the buyers, and yeah, a couple of buyers at this range. But look at that, we lose these 4, we're down to 6,000 isk, and that is 6,250 on the average. Okay, no, be careful here still. I have to say, unfortunately, I thought if we would then have a lot of demand at 6,250, if that's where, you know, investors put up larger and longer term orders saying anything at this range is great, then you could call that a bottom. Here now, I'm still not sure, to be honest. Cryoprotected solutions, again, tied to implants. So we have this March-April increase in price on the introduction of new implant sets, and these are doing quite well, actually pulling away from 100,000 isk, which below that would be my investment point. We're talking 111 to 120 and then 130 very quickly. A completely different situation. Look at the competition on the buyers then. 111, 111, 110, 110, another 19, 19, 19. So here we basically have a much more aligned situation where, sure, buyers still go up, down in price decently quickly, but so do sellers. Sellers go up in price very quickly as well on this front page. And so here we actually get a stronger market for PI compared to anything else in this segment, like enriched uranium, yeah, continuing to go down, back on the 1-year low point. So here, I think another showcase of be careful. We have a very drastic decline down to 6,400 isk, you could say, and then we have a volume response. So here the market said, I'm gonna invest, we gotta grab that cheap investment uranium, pushed the price back up to, what is this going to be, 8, almost 9k, yeah, 8,500. But then no, this is the reality of PI at the moment, and we continue our slow decline basically from the start of October, and we're back at this low price range. So the people that bought here may be looking at losses for now, at least, on their enriched uranium investment. 7,200 for the sellers, 6.4 for the buyers, and again, the buyers are not really that present. Integrity response drones, trying to find a bottom. This looks a little bit more promising, but again, I'm going to say be careful. Although this looks a little bit more structural. 1.4 million for the sellers, almost 1.3 million for the buyers, and it's a decent amount, but the quantities are pretty low. So still, it looks like we could be, you know, hunting for a bottom when we get close to 1.1 million, right? Which is that you know, market expectation that I thought would play. Right here you clearly have 1.1 million, the market not really willing on average to get below that, and so you know that could be our bottom, but the volumes, I would say, aren't high enough to say for sure. Mechanical parts, another 1-year low point, back to 6,000 isk on average, 6.4 for the sellers, 5.7 for the buyers. How low can those buyers go? That's the price here at the moment, the game here at the moment. Like a game of Roomba, they keep trying lower and lower and lower. Eventually we'll reach a bottom, but for now it looks like they are quite talented at driving the prices down. Nanites March-April bubble, so trying to defend 5,000 is not fully succeeding. 5.3 for the sellers to 5.4 for most, 4,700 for the buyers. If you're looking for one investment in a PI material that is tied to implants, I would say nanites below 5,000 isk. Looking at this chart has the potential, and then looking at cryoprotectant solutions that has actually moved away from what I would call the bottom range, that looks pretty damn interesting. Next up, the nano factories. Here we do have another upswing on some buying, so here investors from time to time seem to be coming in when we go substantially below 750,000, 800,000 for the sellers, but those buyers 650, they're just not budging. They're saying we can do this all day long. So my read on the Nano Factory is actually that it's not really sellers, but just suppliers that are giving up. They're saying from time to time, why do I bother making Nano Factories at these prices? Supply is drying up, causes the price to go up. You can clearly see that as well from these dates, right? How long these sell orders have been on the market. That drives the price a little bit back up, but in the current PI market, buyers are saying no, we're staying exactly where we are. There's always going to be enough, there's always going to be too much supply, and eventually you guys are going to be forced to dump to us at these prices, which will then drive these average prices back down. So that is starting to play here as well. First one where it's quite pronounced, looking at the number of days left on the sell orders. Organic mortar applicators, bottom prices as well, looking at 670 for the sellers, almost 600,000 for the buyers. Also a bit of a drying up that is starting to happen, that is causing us to form the bottom, I would say, yeah, those buyers, yeah, the competition is here. So in advanced PI materials, right, below 600,000 disc, I think we can call that the very likely bottom, because enough buyers are coming in, competing with each other at that price range. Recursive computing module, this one is a little bit different. It's basically still up in the air whether people that bought below $1 million made a good deal. We have a nice increased price up to 125 on a big volume spike, so massive investment made by someone or a lot of players, because I mean this is a readable chart. This is definitely the 1 year low point that was reached at the time, but now, right, we're landing on $1 million, just above $1 million for the sellers, and buyers are down to 912,000 disc. Well, it must be said, this is a decent chunk of sell orders that then slowly go down. 910 still being defended, 900,000 discs still being defended, so it is possible. But let's take a quick look at this price. Yeah, 800,000. I think here this could actually have been the right time to jump in, because at 900,000, which was probably around here on the chart, you have a significant amount of demand, and this is more the read that I was having, right? Sure, buyers are not really willing to say we're gonna go below 900,000 disc, although over here they clearly did, but now it's back and they're saying that was maybe a little bit too bad to try and do that to the market, and as a result now, yeah, I think comfortably you can say 900,000 disc for the buyers is probably the bottom range. You have to be a little bit above that 900,000 barrier if you're going to grab some recursive computing modules from the suppliers at the moment. And so yeah, you know the game, and then it's those suppliers that are still supplying a decent chunk of these and are still putting that pressure on the price, because of course they just had a chance to sell at 125, and so we're still on the downside, but I don't think we're gonna reach the 1 year low point anymore unless something keeps happening. Robotics still at that 1 year low point of 60k, but unfortunately we're seeing daily averages below that, and yeah, so those sellers are getting closer and closer. 61,000, well, we're pretty much below that. Look at that fresh supply, full day of new robotics coming to the market, driving the price down from 61.5 to less than 61, and those buyers are now saying 58,000. Yeah, that's where the competition is, and so they want to go below 60,000. But here I wouldn't be confident in saying that this is already the bottom, because it's not 60k, it's below 60k, and I would not be surprised that this demand could dry up, and then we could maybe find ourselves at 55,000 or something like that as the next defense for the price. So very, very dangerous situation, I would say, in PI in general, on when should you make your move, when should you start to buy. It's very difficult to say. Self-harmonizing power cores, obviously very low as well, but a little bit better than the rest, I would say. 1.3 million for the sellers, above 1.1 for the buyers, and a decent defense at that range. Sterile conduits though, very much a 1 year low point at 750 and below. Yep, look at that, 820 for the sellers, still some supplies coming in, and those buyers at 712, trying to get us to 700,000 disc here, which is still very, very low, and sometimes exceeding, which is of course quite worrying if you ever make any investments, which has probably happened, because look at this seesaw right here. After this big decline, some investing, another decline down to 900,000 discs, some investing down to 800,000 discs, some investing back to 9, back down to 8, and they're saying, all right, this is the bottom, back up. Nope, we're breaking that, and buyers are now coming in at 700,000 discs. So all of these upswings could actually turn out to be bad jumping points for the markets. Yukomi superconductors, again, February, March, April here, so that's another implant related one. The exception to the rule, doing quite well, staying above 50k, actually moving up a little bit on the week. 74,000 for the sellers, 70,000 for the buyers. Very respectable price right here. And then our wetware mainframes that are also showing this 1 year low point, touching a million ISK, jumping up a little bit from that, back to 1.1 million for those buyers, 1.2, a little bit above that, to 1.25 million for those sellers. And yet, yeah, this previous data point here makes us worry that this is still not the end for the decline of wetware mainframes. Could it break a million ISK on the buy side and then eventually even reach that that point for the average price? Well, supplies are starting to dry up. Eventually that does happen, but for now it's very difficult to say that, yeah, this is already the bottom that's been formed. So that's PI. Yeah, quite interesting, quite worrying of course, but potentially, if you look at those 1 year charts, of course, very interesting for the longer term. Next up, we're coming in at advanced moon mats at 40.20. And I'm actually going to drink just a little bit. So that I can keep going. Now for advanced moon mats, I'll be honest, I don't know enough about nullsec and the full Tech2 production cycles, let alone the influence of politics, the current war on all of this stuff, the regional differences that may exist. So on this one, I've got a slight grasp because couple of you viewers have been giving me a lot of information on how it works, but I can't say that I fully grasped this market. So here I can't really try and play both sides as to what's happening. But let's get started with crystalline carbonite that is going back down in price after having a little bit of a breakout up to 160 ISK pretty much. We are now back to a below average price of less than 140 at 138.5, and then buyers coming in at 129. Back on the cheap side, I would say for crystalline carbonite, it has been decently volatile, which creates some trade opportunity. But not easy to say that this is going to maintain, or that you know, it's something where you have predictable price ranges basically to jump in on and to jump off on. So for now, for me, very difficult to gauge. I'm seeing some volatility and some opportunities, but pretty risky ones in my book. After crystalline carbonite, we have not metamaterials. We're looking for titanium carbide for Caldari ship production, and look at that, we actually have a data point back up to almost 170. Sellers are at 154, so a little bit of fresh supply, but we just tried some volatility here again. In fact, up to probably 186 or something like that. Buyers are up to 145, and this is definitely that volatility, that potential, right? If you can sell at 180 and you can buy at 150 or below, that's pretty good. Then here, sell at 170, 140, go back into the market, sell again at 170, we reach 140, we try to break out again. It's being closed more and more quickly again, but this is that volatility here in titanium carbide in the last couple of months that's quite surprising to me personally, but pretty damn impressive. After that, we have the Amar one, which is, always have to look a little, the Minmatar one, Fernite Carbide, always have to look for those. And this one is going for, let's take a quick look, 125, a little bit less volatility here. These spikes are actually due to the war, so we actually have a meta influence for a big group that uses a specific chip that has an influence on a Fernite Carbide, but you know, general market volatility, one bump here from a very pronounced 1 year low point. Other than that, we're staying at a below average range for now. Quick look here, 128 for the sellers, 120 for the buyers. And then finally we got tungsten carbide for Amar, way more stable as well, and here in fact since November moving to a new range. At first 175 was its range, a little bit above that, a little bit below that, but never really below 150. Now it's a 125 to 150 range for tungsten carbide, 143 for the first seller, almost 150 for most, 137 for the buyer. So definitely very different aspects to all of these different base materials, you could say. After that we have our metamaterials, so let's look for photonic metamaterials for Galente. Here also a bit more of a moving down to a new range. Slight volume increase has pushed us back above 12.5k, in fact 13,300 for the sellers, 11,650 for the buyers. Here you could still say, alright, supply has dried up, sell prices go up, but buyers aren't showing up to the party just yet. Non-linear metamaterials for Caldari, a bit more volatility, a high range of almost 25,000, a low range of 70,500. That's tradable, right? This is a tradable bump. And as a result, we're talking 20,000 for the sellers now, almost 20,000 for the buyers. Very narrow margin on average to slightly below average range at the moment. After that we have plasmonics for Minmatar, above 20k for the first half of the year. Here is the war spike, a little bit of oversupply, but really we are moving to a lower range. 15,000 disc seems to be that range. 16.6 for the sellers, just below 15,000 disc for those buyers. Terahertz metamaterials went to 1 year low points, 12.5 thousand, started the year a lot stronger right here. And is now slowly crawling its way back. 16,000 for the sellers, but 13,640 for the buyers. Another big margin between sellers and buyers. So here I think we have that same pattern. Supply dries up, average price does go back up, but then eventually it becomes an opportunity, and so we have fresh suppliers coming back in, but those buyers rarely move, and that does mean that if you can find that pattern and you can, for instance, take advantage of it on, where is it, that titanium carbide, right? Buyers are not really forced to move too much away from the 140, 145 range. Then you do have sell opportunities as supplies dries up. It demands a lot of attention. You have to be right, you have to be there every single day basically in order to be able to do that, but it is tradable when you see this volatility. So these are the materials tied to Tech 2 production, very specifically I think mostly for ships and around their weapon modules and things like that. But then we still have the more generic advanced mode materials, and for them we can go a little bit quicker. I think they're basically suffering from the same PI problems, a lack of demand. So here you can clearly see fermionic condensates starts at 90k and is now bottoming out above 60k. We may be bottom forming here though, 66,000, 63,000 for the buyers, and then we have 61 and 60,000, but I don't see buyers being successful below 60,000, for instance, for fermionic condensates. Although here a couple of days where apparently that has been possible. Ferrogel obviously from 40k to 30k, then we've got fullerenes above 1000 disc to below 750. Here still trying to form its real bottom range or find its new range, a little bit of up and downwards motion still visible, but overall obviously it's that same story. Starts high, ends in a pretty low spot. Hypersynaptic fibers, a little bit more of a seesawing movement, but here at the tail end, just inevitably we move to that lower bottom range of less than 9,000 discs. Slight upswing at the tail end, but nothing that indicates a breakout, I would say. Nano transistors very clearly right above 5k, 4k, below 4k. Constant pressure on all of this. Fermionic condensates, ouch, very pronounced 1 year low point. You can say that here this chart looks like some traders will probably make a move on that. Buyers below 1200, sellers at 1300 disc, but yeah, be careful, because it could be just a start again, unfortunately. And then ceramic fibers, slightly better, but again above 350, and now we're starting to move from above 300 disc as its new range. Let's take a look at some Tech 2 ships next, because that's a segment that I always like for trading, active trading. 48.30 for that. There we go, and let's take a look here. Here is the Basilisk that went to a 1-year low point of 180 million ISK. On not a lot of volumes, we have bumped our average price back above 190, which is still pretty damn low, but it's 200 million for the sellers, 180 just above that for the buyers. And this is really the decision that you have to make if you're trading in Tech 2 ships. Do you think that this is a new range that is starting to form here, just like with Advanced Moon Materials, right? Is this finally starting to seep through, or is this an opportunity to jump in on some of the cheapest ships we've had in a year? And then can we potentially, for instance, see the Basilisk go back to 230, which it has done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you could call this 6 and 7, but probably 5 times, seeing this whole as one spike. But that is why I love the Tech 2 ship market. It has quite a few of them that have this lovely wavy pattern with, generally speaking, rather clear points, right? Here below 190, jump in. Above 230, jump out. That is so crystal clear, that can make you so much ISK. But now this breakout to an even lower price point, that is of course a dangerous one to try to predict. Cerberus, well, this one is showing the potential of it. Look, that is so cool. I love that. I really regret that in the sense that I'm out there now in Minmatar space doing that exploration, although it is making me quite a little bit of ISK, but I haven't done a lot of regular trips to Jita, and as a result haven't bought Cerberus. But I'm pretty sure if you go back last EVE Talk and the EVE Talk before that, that it was pretty damn low on the buy side of things, and now here we are, 281 million for the sellers, 250 for the buyers. But if you can sell just below 280, you're looking at a massive profit from just a week or 2 weeks ago. And the Cerberus, good boy here, showing us that that Tech 2 trade potential is still alive. At least in the Cerberus, not sure across the board, but this one, obviously one that I think any trader would have loved to take advantage of. I think you will have been able to buy well below 200 million ISK, and now if you can sell at 280, you're looking at a nice chunk of profit. For me, this is like a little bit of a relief. All right, the Tech 2 ship market is not dead just yet. That video where I talked about, I don't see a general Tech 2 crash just yet. I do see a lot of pressure, seems to be holding quite nicely. Here is the Guardian. This one, making me worry in a sense, because pretty obviously that volatility stopped about 6 months ago. And then we've just been slowly moving to that lower range, below 200 million ISK, and now even below 180 million ISK. It's 184 for the sellers and 163.5 for the buyers. So this is really another story of two sides. If you think that volatility can come back in all of these ships, and that the actual price, for instance, because of what's happening with Morphite, let's take a quick look and see if in industry right here, you do need Morphite in this, not that much, but then yeah, all of this stuff is tied to that Tech 2 for Amar, which is down to a new range. So do you think though that potentially on a big purchase you could get that volatility back in the Guardian? Then this is of course an incredible opportunity to buy as close as possible to 160, a price that I don't think we've seen in a super long time. Then we've got the Hound, a lot better. Ooh, and another one. I like this though. Although we went to 20 million ISK, and here you can start to worry. You could have probably bought Hounds for like 18 million or something like that about a month ago, and now they're selling for 31 million ISK. Very, very nice potential profit margin on 20 million. That's 50%. That's quite nice. 26 million for the buyers. Man, this is such good news for me personally, because that means that that hope is alive for the Tech 2 market. A second sell opportunity here in the Hound, which, well, its range may just be changing a little bit. We'll have to see in the upcoming weeks and especially months what those bottoms are starting to be, because here again you had a decently predictable one, I would say. When we touched on 22.5 or got close to that, you had buyers well to 20 and below already on these charts. But look at those lovely triggers then here, 25 million, break that, jump in, and then 30 million plus, even 35 million, jump out, jump out, jump out. Very nice, very predictable, lovely to do trading in. Ichthyrsa, slightly different situation for our Triglavian ships, of course, with Pogvin that has become super expensive, almost 900 million for an Ichthyrsa and 800 million for the buyers. Volumes down drastically since that change, of course. Then we've got the Ishtar slowly pulling out of its gutter, went down to 180 million ISK on average, is currently selling for 207 and 182 for the buyers. One that is, well, more of a general purpose, right? I don't expect too much volatility in the Ishtar, although you can clearly see that it can happen here from 230 up to 280, a nice 50 million move. It's a lot rarer, I would say, because it has really pretty high volumes for a Tech 2 cruiser, and it has demand in all segments of the game. It's a great PvE ship, it's a great PvP ship, it's got versatility. You can use it for exploration, you can use it for normal space, nullsec, lowsec, highsec. Everywhere there is use for the Ishtar, and as a result it has less volatility because it's got that big broad base compared to a lot of other ships. Then here we get the Manticore. Well, if you look at the Hound, then this looks like a pretty low price range, of course. 25 million for the sellers, 22.7 million for the buyers. So you're buying Manticores below 23 million. Again, if you're on that train that volatility may be coming back, then trying to grab a Manticore close to 23 million makes a lot of sense. The Munin, here is the War Spike, right, used by the Imperium, at least at the time. Not really sure what the situation is after that, but that has been absorbed quite easily, and at the moment you can clearly see how much lower the volumes in Munins is compared to the Ishtar here, and so we are clearly at a lower range. 195 for the sellers, 179 for the buyers. Same thing, I would say for these, right, for a Guardian, for a Munin, I would not be against investing in one ship just to be ready. Put up that buy order, try to grab it, right? I would say 181, something like that. If you want to be sure to have something in hand that's bought in this low period, a 181 I think can be triggered. And then you've got that investment ready. It's only one ship. On any spike, you can generally get your profits on a single ship. Once you move into the two, more, etc., it becomes a lot harder, and that becomes a lot more risky. But for one ship on a chart like this, that still does make sense. Then we get the Nemesis. Here the declining volatility is also a bit worrying, but the bottom of 20 million seems to be quite firm in the last 6 months. So 25 million for the sellers, 22 million for the first few buyers. So if these can dry up, you can try to make your move again. Otherwise, yeah, it's the in-between spot, not high enough to sell, not low enough to buy. The Oneros also showing that the potential volatility is there, but yeah, on average we're trading less than 25, so that's way worse than the Ishtar, probably even worse than the Munin. But it has some volatility that's finally showing back up after a period of sustained super low prices. And so if during this period you really did your best, timed your market, and you bought one for less than 150, I think that was possible at some point, you have another slight sell opportunity at 177. Buyers are still below 150 though, so keep that in mind. Demand is next to non-existent, but supplies tend to, I think, dry up completely, and here we had an upswing to 200 million. Pretty nice. Then we've got a look at a couple of battleships coming up. Here is the Panther going for almost 1.1 billion, buyers just below a billion, showing, in my opinion, slightly below average price, but not that general crash. So I would say that sure, your bottoms may be a little bit lower, but volatility shouldn't be completely gone. Then we get the Purifier going below 25 million at the moment. Also, obviously, that first part of the chart is so good. We go up to 35 million so nice and consistently, and we go down to that 25 million range. So so this was also a very nice period, but once we break this trend, it's a lot more difficult to read this chart, to read this market, and I think risk goes off and players are a lot more careful. So for now, for the Purifier, let's take a quick look where those buyers are at. 23 million. Honestly, on this entire chart, buying for 23 million is still a pretty nice price. Then we have the Scimitar. slight swing up, but also lacking that lovely volatility from before. Lower range, yeah, definitely 201 for the sellers, 180 for a couple of buyers, but also a one purchase ship in my opinion. Then the Widow, slight upswing here in the last couple of months, up to 1.1 billion. In fact, 1.25 billion for the sellers, still below a billion for the buyers. But again, in my opinion, right, battleships costing a lot of materials for a Tech 2 ship, and so I'm trying to use these as a gauge of are we seeing a general crash, are we seeing generally lower prices across the board? Well, it's a Caldari ship, and here definitely not. Then what's the other one? The Panther is Panther right here is Minmatar. That one sees a little bit of pressure. Maybe I should add an Amarr Tech 2 battleship and a Caldari one as well. A Galente one as well, to try and see about differences between the races, because that is of course their production cycles are actually, you could see them as different columns as well, that have been behaving very differently in advanced moon maps. I'll think about it. Then we finally have the Zealot. That's an Amarr one that's definitely moved to a lower range. You're currently able to buy one for 171 million, very much below the entire chart by quite a little bit. I would say Amarr purchases for the longer term, they could be interesting, but granted, on this chart it doesn't look too appetizing compared to the Caldari ones. Cerberus, very nice. Manticore has that potential in my opinion, so that could be the current meta, unfortunately. If you're looking for that volatility, well, the advanced movements show that as well. It's gonna be the Caldari segment. Next up, the Tech 3 ships. Ooh, we're already at an hour, alright. Okay, well, I love talking about this stuff, so that is fine. It's going to be an extra long one this week, although I had already decided on just taking a look at the Gecko. Let's start with the tactical destroyers. Here is the Confessor, and my prediction is already coming true. I said last week, when we were still buying Confessors close to 35 million and still selling below 40 million, that considering all the others, supply would dry up and that would not be sustainable. You can see the chart, we have moved up above 40 million ISK and we're now selling at 45 million ISK. Buyers have been forced up to 37.5. So here, right, if you bought a couple of Confessors at 35 million last week, you have already, you're looking at almost a 10 million ISK profit on every ship already. Volume wise, of course, you gotta be careful to not completely crash that market, but supply wise it doesn't look like it's going to be solved anytime soon. We don't see really any supply for the Confessor coming online despite the push up in price. And if I'm not mistaken, the guilty party, you could say, is the Hecate, that luckily for us is starting to show some signs of pressure on the price. It's going for 50 million ISK and it went like that for like almost 2 weeks, I think. Still going for 49 million now. Buyers are at 44 million. And look at that. This is where the supply is. Of course, we got 69 here 2 days ago, some supply in the last 24 hours, definitely a decent chunk in the last 2 and 3 days. Yeah, the Hecate going for 50 million ISK, that is going to absorb a lot of attention. Players trying to make and bring Hecates to the market is going to leave the Confessor at the wayside. So this is an upswing that yeah, I told you guys about last week, and this is not really, alright, I'm such a professional, but this is me trying to show you guys that the tactical destroyer market is a super nice market. This is one of the best ships in my opinion, ship classes that has been introduced into the game. A massive hit, something very unique. Strong ships but not completely overpowered because they're still pretty small, useful in nullsec as well in big fleets. And they're a big hit that see enough demand and supply to have those market forces really do their thing, and it's a lovely ballet to watch in my opinion. So the Confessor up here, yeah, you could have definitely taken advantage of that just by watching Eve Talk. And then here the Hecate is now starting to show some signs of pressure, but I'm not seeing the volumes that are gonna bring this down to the 40 million range again. So it does look to me like we could be in a structural upswing because the Jackdaw has also moved up from 40 million ISK. Basically, this move here predictably was going to show up in the confessor, and it is starting right now. And the Jackdaw is going for 46 million ISK, 40 million for the buyers. And then here we do have 700, 100, 100. This ought to be able to keep the Hecate from staying this high, right? Because you don't have to fill up the Jackdaw that much anymore to keep that stable. So I think the Jackdaw, the Hecate supply is going to continue to put pressure on the price. Confessor could still be up by a decent amount. But yeah, above 45 for the sellers, close to 40 for the buyers seems to be where this market is heading. And then if this Zwebel is confirming that, and right here it is definitely confirming that as well, 44 million for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers. The Zwebel is quite abundant, although fresh supply is, in line, just a couple of ships. Makes sense for the least popular one. And it is definitely reaching that higher range as well, and able to stay there for like a full week or so. So yeah, this confessor move was actually decently predictable, and because it's a normal market reaction, and here it just happened. So that's pretty damn cool to see. Very different story in the cruisers. Here is the Legion, where I can't make such types of predictions, because what we often see here is bottom prices at bottom supplies and things like that. So this one is a lot more crazy in my book. What I dare to do from time to time is buy like 3, 4, 5 of these tactical destroyers. When it comes to the cruisers, it's one hull and that's it. Try to buy low, try to sell high. A lot less predictability. So the Legion is currently going for 166. The buyers are coming in at 151. Still a pretty wide margin. New supply, nothing, and well, we're basically stable at the current range. The Loki has a little bit of pressure on it, going for 168 million, 153 for the buyers, and yeah, full page of supply. Look at that, 1.5 pages of supply. You're easily going to more than 2 pages for 2 days of supplies, and there is some price response. At least that is still logical, but compare that then to the Legion, that is basically stabilizing at no supplies. These amounts of Lokis I think should do a bigger price response, but that's not happening. So I can't read this market like I can read basically the destroyer market. Galente Proteus back down from a 1-year high point of 200 million is still going for 161, 150 for the buyers, and that's more in line, right? A big chunk of 24 causing the decline, and is going to keep prices from really rising too quickly. And not too much, but a decent amount of supply in the last couple of days, bringing the price down and continuing pressure. And then we get the Tengu, that's actually bouncing off of the 180 million range on the 5-day moving average, 182 for the sellers, 158 for the buyers. And here again, a story that I don't understand. The Tengu is going for above 180 million ISK, more than the Legion, more than the Loki, which the Loki is generally considered to be the best Tech 3 cruiser at the moment, and yet where's the supply? Nowhere. Last 24 hours, not a single Tengu brought to the market, despite the fact that you're selling for pretty much the best price. Just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. To see this down spike from 200 million. Where are all those ships? I don't know, but yeah, that Tech 3 cruiser market remains quite enigmatic for me personally. So at the moment, it's not in a good spot to, in my opinion, either really sell or buy. If you have a profit from these bottoms, you can definitely take it across the board. But for a jumping point, I don't think we're there anytime soon, in fact. And then finally, we've got the extra product that's coming in at 1.705. 0.5, and then I want to take another look at the Gecko. We have looked at it not that long ago, but I think we were in this protracted bottom of 100 million, and very interesting, honestly, right now we are at apparently the start of the rise, and we can still see on this chart the potential upside for Gecko, 180 million ISK. December is over, and the very special events, the holidays, should be over. Haven't seen any new supplies from Geckos coming online due to these events organized by CCP, and so inflation hedge is starting to show up. It is, in my opinion, inevitable in an online economy like EVE Online that you always have a growing money supply in general, and so inflation is always the name of the game. And the one type of item that is a hedge against inflation is one that has limited supply. A little bit like gold in the real world. Now, a lot of players are saying, yeah, that's plex, right? Because you have to pay real money to do that. But Gecko is actually even more an item like that because, well, there's a limited supply. You know, sometimes you have BPCs that drop from the event, and then you, of course, get this. You get that big crash down. But as long as CCP now does not bring new geckos online into the game, the geckos should increase in value, as you can only lose them at the moment. You can only decrease the amount that is available, and so the value of what is left does tend to go up, and that move seems to have started now since December. Right now, when they were at 100 million, we're up to 115. Bars are up to 105, and this is a very interesting one if you want to find that hedge against inflation. But you know, plex, quite often we see sales, and there is that uncertainty at the moment when it comes to ISK generation and maybe even real life circumstances and things like that as well. Your alternative would be something like the Gecko, because of course, you know, at the moment there are no signs that there are going to be any new ones. Most of the holiday festive events have just gone over, have just passed, and we're in this spot now where we just took off from the bottom prices. You can see the upswing range up to 180, and this was about a year ago, right? You can imagine now that we have that first part of a new year happening, and as long as they don't do anything when it comes to geckos for instance, FanFest, then you're looking at potentially just a straight upswing towards the summer, as they're used, destroyed, and there's no way to replace them. So this is an interesting one as well. I myself have, like, I think around 10 geckos that are sitting there that are basically my small gold bullion at almost any time. And you know, sometimes I'm looking, should I be moving in? Well, I would say if you can buy some geckos for less than 105 million, that could still be the right jumping point at the moment. So there you go, guys, our little gold bar in EVE Online, the Gecko. Quite a promising start, I would say, in December, and let's see where it goes from here. That's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.